On Nationwide this evening, we're in the Liberties to see how Dublin keeps on changing as we discover how this old part of the capital has evolved and changed in recent years. We see the plans for development in the area, visit some of the old pubs and the new award-winning restaurants. Plus, we find green spaces where you'd never expect them in the city. Welcome to Nationwide and to the Liberties in Dublin, where this evening we have stories from and about this part of our capital. In medieval times, Dublin was a walled city, and this area was located outside those walls to the west of the city centre beyond what is now Christchurch and St Patrick's cathedrals. The authorities who ran the city had little control of the areas outside the walls, but established licences or liberties and gave these liberties to religious institutions to administer. Here, in this part of Dublin, the name remained down the generations, and today, in and around what was the main thoroughfare out of the city and to the west, Thomas Street, is still known as the Liberties of Dublin. Over the centuries, the area thrived, with many small businesses being established, especially in the 17th and 18th centuries, when the Liberties became the location for many of Dublin's fledgling industries. Alongside these factory workshops, stores and shops, housing was built, and the layout and streetscape we see today came into being. And some of the industries continue to this very day.
In Dublin, and you in Dublin.
Thomas Street, which is the main thoroughfare in the Liberties, has seen the effects of economic change more than most. It was at one point a great draw for Dublin shoppers, and sadly those days are gone. However, this historic street is undergoing a new lease of life, as our reporter John Kilrain has been finding out.
Thomas Street, seen here in the 19th century, has been one of Dublin's most important streets for hundreds of years. In ancient times, it was the Great Road to the west. Known for its markets and shops, up to the 1970s, it attracted consumers from all over the city. But the closure of iconic stores like Frawley's was part of a long-term decline. That happened during the Celtic Tiger, and at the time, estate agents dubbed Thomas Street the street that the boom forgot. It became known more for antisocial problems and drug dealing. But in recent years, new businesses have arrived, including the street's first ever Michelin star restaurant.
Yeah, well, it's just Monday, so if I get a chance, I'll be in here doing a couple of bits, menu development, testing out dishes, tasting some food, and it's the only time when you actually get a bit of peace and quiet, you know. So the fire lit from early, and yeah, just gonna cook a few bits. A new snack. We're gonna do a bit of trout, and we're gonna do a bit of a raw fish, basically a hamachi crudo, which is sliced raw tuna, for want of a better phrase.
Keelan found Thomas Street to be the ideal location when he started up his new venture with his brother over 5 years ago.
Why did I pick Thomas Street? I guess Thomas Street's the centre of Dublin, you know. A lot of people said you're kind of crazy setting up down there, but if you walk 5-10 minutes in any direction, you're kind of 10 minutes that way you're in Smithfield, 10 minutes that way you're on Stephen's Green, 10 minutes that way you're in Portobello. So it's bang in the centre of the city. And for me, it's the hub of the city as well. It's the busiest part of the city, it's the oldest part of the city. You've still got all those notions of community still exist around here. Some of these people in the locality that have been here for 40, 50, 60 years are regular customers of ours, and you start to see now in the last couple of years that more kind of independent creative operators are moving in. Comparing that to like setting up a suburban restaurant or something like that, I feel like there's a bit more freedom here. We want to be free to do whatever food we want and to change it with whatever frequency we want. So I feel like it's kind of a cultural and a creative hub in Dublin, and it allows more freedom that way, you know.
Variety Jones has a food philosophy based on chef's choice and sharing.
For me, it's more about food being that medium to bring people together. It's the same thing like songs, poems, storytelling, a bottle of whiskey. These are all mediums that people in Ireland have used for many years to bring people together and to kind of have that kind of notion of family togetherness and fun, I guess. So for me, food is that medium. So the idea when you come here is that the dishes are to share, they're dumped in the middle of the table. So, I mean, it's not even set up as a Michelin star restaurant, it's just Michelin deemed it kind of worthy of a star. So we'll take that all day. Obviously, that's great for business.
Guinness's nearby used to be the biggest employer in the area. Now the storehouse is one of the biggest tourist attractions in the country. Christchurch Cathedral is at the other end of the street, but local businesses say they had not been getting much of a passing trade.
People always leapfrogged here to get to the storehouse or Kilmainham jail. We've always kind of suffered from being the poor relation on the outskirts of the city centre. So it's probably not changed quickly enough for some people, but for others too dramatically. There's obviously a lot of vagrancy, but that's everywhere in Dublin. There's also a lot of drug taking, so that doesn't help. Lack of police on the street is a big thing as well. There's sprouts of how the area can be, and there's still a couple of things that haven't really changed. Like there's still some market traders up on the corner there, but we have Michelin star restaurant, we have a Korean restaurant, a lot of pizzerias opening up, but like sit-in ones. So it's changing, and I think people are beginning to realise that there's more to Dublin than just the city centre.
Are you right there, folks, please? Are you right there? Lift your glasses, move your asses, do your talking while you're walking. Have you got no homes to go to?
Recently, though, Thomas Street has been getting in on the Tourism Act. This tour features street food in the Liberties.
Bacon and Ballymaloo, black pudding and pear. If you don't take meat, it would be mushroom. And I'll give a wave here to the guys here as well. What we do on our tours is we share the story of the Liberties through street food. And Container Coffee is a business we want to support because we just think it's fabulous what they do with the community. I love their sustainability story. It matches in exactly what we want to do. And what we celebrate in this shop is a gourmet sausage roll with bacon and Ballymaloo. Bacon and Ballymaloo being the gourmet version of a standard sausage roll. Myrtle Allen being the first woman in Ireland to receive a Michelin star for cooking. And we want to bring people into the heart and soul of the city and share local stories. The location of Container Coffee here with St Patrick's Tower, built in 1757, part of the remains of Rowan Co Whisky Distillery, the oldest pear tree in Ireland, the beehive behind us, and the project to bring greenery into the city centre. So it's all about connecting the food, the story, and the history together. Maybe Ballymaloo took us more. Do you want a little bit more? This is a side. Yes. So my wife and I actually started walking food church during COVID. It was a social project. It wasn't a business. It was to bring people from the neighbourhood. There was no tourism during COVID to support these local businesses. And the idea of it was to get people walking, learning history, and support the local vendors. COVID ended, and we started to do this full time. So I left my day job, and this is what we do now. Our background is actually had always been tourism and storytelling. We actually met working in Guinness. I worked for Guinness for 10 years, and I met my wife. We were working in Guinness, so that's kind of what brought us to the community and the stories. Within the first week, actually, that COVID ended, we had an American, two retired ladies. They came back in the tour a week later. We realised we were connecting the area and the story and the food, and people want to eat like a local. We always believed that Irish food was underrated. You know, the gourmet sausage roll, you know, we take these things for granted, but for most of my guests, it's like discovering pizza. It's where they make Vikings and Vikings Valhalla, the TV shows. Okay. It's really super. Gorilla, I love this shop, guys. Let me just give you a bit of background about them. They're like us. They started in during COVID. The owners lost their job, and they opened up a food truck, and they put it at the sea in their mother's garden. And gorilla is an Irish word for grilled, so you're not going to eat gorilla. Don't worry about that, okay? Let me just explain what they do. This is going to sound boring at first, but it's actually really exciting. They make toasted sandwiches, toasties. But I'm going to recommend a beefo, because it actually is a product of this tour. It was a Scottish girl came on our tour, told us about it, and now it's the best seller for the shop. It's amazing. I don't want to call it the best hangover food in the world, but it is, okay? Okay, by the way, these are the gates from the television ads.
Kevin's doing a great job giving us the history, and then we can taste the culture and the food that made Dublin special, like the Guinness and beers, and then now this shop for some sandwiches.
been fantastic so far. You can best know culture through its food, so why not have an Irish street food tour? Doesn't that make sense?
Market trader Kathleen Farrell has lived through all the changes. Hers is one of the last stalls remaining. She's seen here at a stall in a photograph from 1978.
I'm here since I was a kid, and when I mean a kid, I mean a kid. It's a long generation of family tradition. My mother, my grandmother and my great-grandmother was here in Thomas Street, on the streets. We always sold fruit and veg and fish and all of that. And I always remember my grandmother giving out because the Italians came and they started up the fish and chip shops. So that was, a nail in the coffin of in regards of fish trading on the streets. Well, you see, it was absolutely brilliant because even though all the shops was here, the likes of Frawley's and Duffy's and all, people lived overhead. They had rooms, tenement rooms. And it was great, and all the smells of all the fresh fruit and veg that would be on the street in the day. And then, people coming home and getting meals ready. But you always had great sense of smell of vegetables cooking all day long. It was absolutely brilliant. You wouldn't have wanted any other job. It didn't matter what the weather was. There were 65 traders on this street, and that was no joke, and they were all trying to rear families out of it now. So as a couple of the families got married and that, they ventured into new careers, such as they went administrating jobs and they went factory working. Because remember, you were in an area where there were 7 slaughterhouses, and slowly but surely, when we joined the EEC, all of that was taken, like the fish market was taken away, the wholesale fish market was taken away, these all started to be taken away. So that was all job losses in the area. And then traditional Irish life completely just changed.
Kennedy's is the last traditional pub on the street.
The pub scene has changed completely. Young people don't go to the pubs. We depend obviously on tourists because we're on the Guinness tour. We're Jameson around the corner, Christchurch, so we're right on the strip of, all the tourist spots. And then we do entertainment 5 nights a week, so we cater for the locals and people that live generally in the area. And we are the only traditional local bar left on the street, so I think that's why we do so well. The reason we started out the full food menu was because the daytime trade had died off because a lot of the locals stopped coming during the day, and we started to cater to try and get the tourists in because the tourists are always looking for a drink and something to eat. We try to keep it as traditional as possible. Everybody loves the corned beef, the stew, and then after that then your usual bar food. It's really taken off, and it's good food and it's working.
The Clock Pub used to be a landmark in Dublin, but like most of the old pubs, it's been replaced by more modern establishments. In this case, the Love Tempo, adding to an eclectic mix.
I meet loads of young girls and young lads and all that goes into Love Temple or goes here, or they're on their way down to Variety Jones, and international people that's visiting, going into these places. I absolutely think it's great. It's nice to know that there's still an interest in the area. Now, what can we do? Go on.
The street still has its sense of being a local area.
It still retains its Dublin charm, still has a good community feel about the place. Everybody looks out for each other. Some of the older business people around here are quite happy to have somebody opening up a shop next door to them because people bring people.
Like in Thomas Street, it still has all these notions of community. You still have Kathleen, Dave and Catherine down on the street stall there who give you the information that you need setting up in here. If you need, even if you need a jump in business, they'll tell everyone that comes by that there's this restaurant down the road, there's this new pub opening,
Despite continuing problems, new businesses mean fresh hope for one of Dublin's oldest streets.
I really think for this area, get back a few of the fruit stalls and yes, get back a fish stall. Let's start teaching children all about food. And if we could only get on top of that, open our minds and make it happen, it'd be a great street again, and it would be better than what's down around Grafton Street or Wicklow Street and all that. This would be a fantastic street.
Well said, Kathleen Farrell. A very positive view of the possibilities for the future of Thomas Street from a woman who knows it well. After the break, more stories from Dublin's Liberties as I go in search of green spaces in this part of Old Dublin. See you in a few minutes. Welcome back to Nationwide, where this evening we're in the Liberties in Dublin, bringing you stories of renewal and change. Earlier, we saw some of those changes in Thomas Street, and just a stone's throw from there, in Bridgeford Street, here we have a totally modern park with not a gate in sight. Situated in the heart of the Liberties is Bridgefoot Street Park, an area of greenness and open space in the south inner city. The park is flanked on two sides by blocks of flats and the new Bonham Street social housing development on a third. It has a community garden, a children's playground, a container selling coffee, and in an area too often associated with drug abuse and antisocial behaviour, this small oasis is a hopeful sign that things are improving. I've come to meet people who cherish the park. First, Deirdre Prince from Dublin City Council, who was central to the development of the park from the beginning. Just how important is this green space in such a built-up and historic part of the city?
So the area is one of the areas that we looked at to see what a deficit of access to green space they had. And within a square kilometre of the Liberties, there's around 15,000 people. And at that time, there was roughly 0.68 of a square metre of access to green space for the local people. The World Health Organization recommends 9 square metres per person for your well-being. And in some of the leafy suburbs, we might have 25 square metres per person. So that just shows how much of a deprivation of access to green space there was in an area like this. So at the time, this site was a housing development that was knocked with a view to redeveloping it, and then the crash came and so it was left derelict for years, and then the people around the area started to slowly colonise it and do allotments or start doing little bits of artwork. So along with them, we approached the council to see if we could get this rezoned from housing to parkland.
Community engagement is so important for people to feel that it is their park. How has this gone down with the local community?
So the design of this park involved a lot of community consultation. So there were a lot of meetings, a lot of groups within the site here to try and figure out what the people wanted. And one of the requests was a big mound, and we got it. And it's an amazing space. You know, it's an amazing feature to have in a park in a city centre, and we've also got a fantastic slide from it as well. So.
And the idea of a park with no gates, and given also the fact that we're in an area that has had significant challenges, what's been the approach in that regard?
So our approach in Dublin City Council parks is to not have gates on our parks anymore. And by keeping your park open, it allows a lot more people to frequent the park and pass through it. And it sends a signal to the area that we're welcoming, you know, that anybody can use the park at any time of the day. And there hasn't been any more issues within this park than any of our gated parks. So slowly but surely we're trying to pull back the railings.
A quarter of the park is given over to the Taplin Fields Community Garden, which is managed by volunteers. It's named after the late Richie Taplin, who died in 2019.
So Richie was a really big advocate for maintaining this as a green space. Unfortunately, I never met the man, but his name lives on in the garden, and also in our ethical approach.
What works well in the soil?
We've grown a lot of different types of brassicas, kales, and a lot of different types of fruit bushes as well. The way that we organise ourselves is based on sustainability and ecology. So it's less about the product of the garden, and it's much more about how we organise ourselves to create microenvironments. These microenvironments support the development of insects and birds.
Have you ever had any worries about antisocial behaviour here?
The community is very involved, and the local community, they might not come down and they might not do stuff in the garden, but they are keeping an eye out for us, and that kind of helps with any kind of antisocial tendencies that we might come across, particularly with the space being so open. And now that people recognise that it's a garden area that is being used regularly, we've seen a fall off in activity.
You can get a great cup of coffee and toasted sandwich here in the park. Mugshot is a social enterprise run and owned by PACE, the charity which supports people who've been through the criminal justice system.
We're coming up to 2 years in this park, and what the Mugshot allows is for those people to get proper real work experience working with the general public, trained as baristas, trained as running a business. And what that does is allows them to build a CV, it allows us to give them a reference, but most importantly it builds self-confidence to get back out into the labour market. We're more or less based on the north side, but we got this great opportunity thanks to Dublin City Council, and to come to this green space in the middle of the city has been really exciting for us. It's opened a lot of doors for us, and the community are hugely supportive.
Locals Pauline McAdams and Demo McGrain remember a time not long ago when the site here was wasteland, so the park is a welcome development.
I used to use the park every day till my dog died. Yeah. My dog died 2 weeks ago, so I still come in in the morning times. It's great now. When you wake up in the morning, you see all the grass and the whole lot. It's nice fresh air and all the grass.
You've young children growing up here, Pauline, now, so this must improve things for them.
Oh, the park is great for the young people especially. There was nothing here, it was waste ground. And you know what, when it opened, everyone was amazed because we've never had a big green space like this in this area. And now with the community gardeners, now we can do projects with the young people, city kids where they used to gardening. And now the gardeners are brilliant, so we do projects with them every couple of months. They done a project a couple of weeks ago where they had little mini greenhouses and the gardeners helped them plant seeds. So it's an ongoing process to introduce kids to sustainability and planting and growing. Well, that brings us to the end of this evening's programme, and as we've seen, there's been a lot of change here in this part of the city, but also a lot of positivity from the people who live and work here, and that continues to be inspiring. From all of us on the Nationwide team here in the Liberties in Dublin, bye-bye. On Wednesday's Nationwide, we're in Donegal to look back on the life and times of one of that county's best known and best loved singers, the late Bridie Gallagher.
Sadly, over the weekend, street trader Kathleen Farrell, who featured in this evening's Nationwide programme, passed away. Areshte Garavanan.